Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to talk about the use of threats and escalation. And this is a very good week to talk about this sort of thing, courtesy of the lovely Mr. Putin, who has given us a masterclass in the perils of escalation. So I like to talk about escalation and threats quite a bit in negotiation, and the reason for that is that many people get it wrong. They usually use it too early, they usually use it inappropriately, and it usually backfires on them. So you have to know what it is you're doing to make a threat or an escalation in the negotiation sense actually work. So this is going to be the topic. For anyone new to the channel, I am the collaborative negotiator, professional negotiator of over 10 years experience, and I like to talk about current events to highlight certain negotiation themes. So back to Mr. Putin. Well, what we know that he did this week, end of last week actually, was that he raised the nuclear alert level. So this is of course in addition to the fact that he had already massively escalated by actually invading Ukraine. I'll talk more about that in a bit. But on this bit, I'm talking about him raising the nuclear alert level, which is a very obvious and visible threat and an escalation. And one of the things that I've been struck by this week is how little anyone's even talking about it. I mean, the media are, a little bit, but none of the politicians are. And you see, what seems to be happening is that they're essentially ignoring him. I'll talk a little bit more about that again later in the video. But one of the things that was interesting earlier this week was that when a spokesperson for the Russian government was asked why the nuclear alert level had been raised, they cited the aggressive threats and aggressive tones that had been made by Foreign Secretary. In particular, they singled out Liz Truss and her comments as being aggressive and causing them to raise the nuclear alert level. What did she say that was so threatening? Well, to be honest, I can't really be too sure because she just said her usual rubbishy things, including her vocal support for people to go to Ukraine and fight, even if they had absolutely no qualifications, or even were Ukrainians for that matter. So various politicians had to contradict her and say that this is a very bad idea if you don't have professional military experience or are Ukrainian going back to fight your country. So yeah, she was just blowing hot air as Liz Truss is prone to doing. And yet for some reason, this seemed to have triggered off a disproportionate reaction from the Russians to raise the nuclear level, which quite frankly is rather hilarious. Because the analogy I like to use here is that you go and get your shotgun because the little poodle has just barked at you. Liz Truss is indeed a not particularly bright or effective individual, as far as I can gather. And so anything that she actually says isn't something that the Russians are likely to take especially seriously. The Russian Foreign Minister, Lavrov himself, was very dismissive of Liz Truss. So I think we can conclude that that reason for the Russian raising the nuclear alert level is somewhat bogus. So what it was pure power play. And this was Putin attempting to strengthen his position to prevent people challenging him. That is all it was. That is how he used that threat of escalation. But as I alluded to earlier, no one seemed to have taken it seriously. No one else has raised their threat level. No one else is talking about launching nukes at Russia or any other such thing. In fact, pretty much just a collective shrug of the shoulders of the guy's just being an idiot. That seems to be the message that's coming from world leaders. So what does this actually mean? Well, there's two things. One is the obvious one. It has massively undermined Putin's credibility. I mean, this is a threat that no one seriously thinks he's actually going to carry out. Certainly not just to invade Ukraine, and certainly not if individual help in Ukraine, shall we say. Of course, it is a threat that would be taken seriously if anyone was going to invade Russia, but no one credibly believes that NATO or any other entity has any plans whatsoever to invade Russia. So this is a very empty threat, and it's a threat that was seen as being delivered from a position of weakness, not of strength. And that's one of the key issues when you're using threat or escalation, is that if the other side see you as doing it as from a position of weakness, then they recognize that and they don't take up to that particularly seriously. So this is the issue, the first issue, that the threat has to be credible to be effective. The second issue, if Putin has not, is that he has actually escalated twice now. First by invading Ukraine, and second by raising the nuclear alert level. He has now put himself in a very difficult position. He either has to credibly carry out both escalations, well, the first one at least, with the second one being taken more seriously than it currently is, or he has to back down. And I imagine, of course, his ego is very much not going to be going towards the backing down option. So he's stuck in this position of a threat that no sane person would ever actually want to use, and it's not having the desired effect. It has not at all deterred all the nations, all the West, from raising sanctions against Russia, from continuing to flood Ukraine with weapons imports and so on. So if anything, it seems to have galvanized them into the opposite. It made people more determined to do those things, not less determined. So this is the conclusion that I want to highlight to everyone. Whenever you are in a negotiation, and make no mistake, Putin isn't invading Ukraine just for the sake of military action and to get lots of people killed. He doesn't mind people getting killed. That doesn't bother him. But that's not what he wants. He wants something else, and that something else is power, control, respect, prestige, whatever word you want to use. And what he has done by escalating so early, both in invading and by raising the nuclear alert level, is that he had diluted that impact, and he had made himself less credible to the eyes of the other side. And he had now backed himself into a corner where it's go for broke or go home, essentially. So he could lose badly, and of course the jury is very much out on how successful Russian military is going to be in Ukraine. No doubt Putin will be in a position where he will desperately need to dress up whatever the outcome is as a victory, because anything less than a visible victory to him is going to be failure. It's going to be a climb down. And when you are at the top, there is no other direction than down. And Putin knows that, and he had actually made his position weaker, not stronger. And any negotiator adopting that sort of tactic runs the risk of doing very much the same thing. So I hope you found this shorter than usual video interesting. Threat dynamics is always an interesting conversation when teaching about negotiations, and we shall see what Putin does next, because I fear his ability to escalate and to make more threats, of course, have certainly not ended, and he may find himself even more desperate and going even further. Let's hope not, but of course only time will tell.